Everybody, John Spencer. Not talking about Dharma or amulets, but once again, after about 2 or 3 music videos of self-made music and one biography, I'm going to talk about something else, quite technological. I want one more talk, after which I'm going to do some amulet talk and some Dharma in the next podcasts. And continue my biography. But this one's about the carbon emissions. The Paris Agreement, of which a lot of countries, and America has signed, so all the countries of the world will sign in turn, is that by 2030, no more carbon emission vehicles will be sold, meaning your car and your bike, motorbike, your car, petrol generators, stuff like that. Vehicles, sorry. Not petrol generators, they forgot to mention that. And a lot of other things, which is why I say no more carbon emission vehicles by 2030, my butt, with a double T, my ass. My Aston Martin. My Aston Martin, no carbon emissions by 2050, and no carbon emission vehicles by 2030. So, after 2030, there will be no more made or sold. They're going to stop making petrol and diesel cars, so petroleum and diesel cars before that, because of the ban. And Nissan and most of the BMW, most of the car companies are now moving towards the electric car because they know. So they're adapting because Elon Musk's Tesla vehicle's success was a disruptive technology. That's what you call a disruptive technology. It's a technology that comes in that disrupts a whole industry. Yeah, you have destructive technologies. You have different kinds of destructive advertisement, destructive all sorts of sciences that you use destructive methods with. Destructive means revolutionary. In this case, it causes an industry to revolutionize itself. So, and because of the Paris Agreement, it's more to do with the fact that the planet is dying. And finally, politicians have started listening because the voters have understood. The voters have understood, haven't they? Yeah. So, because the voters have understood, yeah, the voters have understood, this means that those who want the votes have to get votes by saying they're going to do something about the things that the voters care about because they've understood. And so the fact that global warming and climate change is a reality has become common knowledge even with people in Harlem or in Gipton in Leeds, which is worse than Harlem. So if I said Harlem and you think, or Compton or something like that, and you think I'm being derogatory, I'm not, because I come from places and I've lived in places that are at least as bad as Compton. And actually they weren't bad places, they were good places, and Compton is a good place if you live there and you're from there and you're safe there. Safe there means even if you live in a very rich area that's just for rich foreigners or something, like John McAfee did, his neighbour got murdered. Cheers, coffee. So you're not safe anywhere, really. Yeah. But anyway, back to carbon emissions. So, everything's going electric. You can keep your car and your motorbike, just to answer this, because you're going to be asking yourself, well, if it's going to be forbidden to sell cars and make cars that use petroleum or diesel, yeah, in the world, what's going to happen to my car? Well, I'll tell you. What's going to happen to your car is that you can continue to use it. But continuing to use it means that spare parts aren't being made anymore. So whatever is left, if they're not sold out, are going to be extremely expensive. Yeah. And petroleum itself, for the public, for cars, is going to be extremely expensive. So if you got a Rolls Royce or a Harley Davidson, or you are or have a big Aston Martin. Oh, my Aston Martin, man. My dad used to have an Aston. He's had a few Aston Martins. And he is a big Aston Martin. And that Aston Martin has a hole in it. Anyway, there's a lot of Aston Martins in the world. But the big but, and here we are, no more carbon emission vehicles by 2030. My but is B-U-T, not B-U-T-T. My but is, okay, no more carbon emission vehicles by 2030 in order to have a clean environment, a clean air by 2050. So no more carbon emissions in 2050. Yeah, you're not selling vehicles, and you're going to make the existing vehicles on the road too expensive to run, so people will sell them, or won't even be able to sell them. You'll just stop using them and keep them as museum pieces in your living room, which isn't bad. My brother, for example, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 motorbikes that I know about. 2 Harley Davidsons, a Kawasaki 1200 something or other. A very customized one of those is just like a 125 that sounds like it turns itself off at the traffic lights and stuff. They're very eco-friendly and stuff. But with flashing lights, he's customized it all. He's customized his other bikes, and actually 3 of them, or 2 of them, or 2 or 3 of them are in his living room on show. Because the ones he's got now are so good, so enjoyable that he's not going to ride the other ones anyway. And they're like, you put ornaments in your house. So that's what they will become, your motorbike and your car and stuff. Or there will be conversion to take the engine out and convert it to electric. That's going to be another option. But what I'm saying is that to get rid of carbon emissions to save the world by 2050, not selling any vehicles and making the existing ones too expensive to run on the road, motorbikes and cars, is not going to stop this problem of global warming and ozone hole, yeah, and carbon emission and all of the environmental changes related to it, because I would have to do a whole podcast about what carbon emission is doing to the environment in its many facets and how it's affecting other things that then destroy the environment in their own way as well, and how other industries that destroy the environment depend on the oil industry, and so on and so on and so on, because everything is connected, just like in the Buddha Dhamma, Paticca Samuppada, or dependent origination. When this happens, that happens. When that happens, it causes this to happen. It's cause and effect. Yeah. So how are we going to have no carbon emission in the air by 2050 by banning cars and motorbikes by 2030? When my but is, yes, yeah, you're going to ban those 2 things, but what about my 5,000 watt petrol generator? Petrol means gasoline or petroleum, depending what country you're in, or gasoline or gasohol, whatever you want to call it, yeah? Oil industry based fuel, carbon emission fuels, like burning coal, the coal mines. Yeah, like Trump said, we're opening the coal mines again. as a carbon emission. Factories, carbon emissions, so we're going atomic and solar, yeah. But what about the container ships that are traveling across the oceans, bringing bananas to America and bringing iPhones to Thailand and China, and well, not to China because they copied them just as well, but you know, logistics and traveling things around the world, and trains and planes. What about all of the aeroplanes, both military and public sector, and the tourist industry, and helicopters, yeah, and stuff like these. The new Navy SEALs have these like flying suits. You put them on your hands like Iron Man, basically like Iron Man. It works just like Iron Man, except it doesn't last as long and you can't go as high, but they're pretty fast and very accurate. So Iron Man is real now, yeah. That's carbon emission. And what about all the destroyer ships and the Navy and the tanks? They use diesel and petrol. There are some solar powered ones and ones with lithium ion batteries. But the thing is, with solar power and lithium ion batteries, which happen to help us to get more eco-friendly and on the outer layer of the onion, but on the inner layer of the onion, to make a solar panel, the industries involved in making it and the materials needed also use and cause carbon emission, just as much as vehicles that are carbon emission fuels. Once we've got enough made, if we've survived, and enough solar panels, then yeah, good. But if the making of a solar panel produces as much damage to the environment through the carbon emission industries needed to make that solar panel, then you're actually defeating the object of the game, yeah? You're actually just not solving anything, except saving money afterwards once you've got your solar panel. It is better, for sure. I'm going solar. I've gone solar. I am not completely solar because I haven't set it up yet, but I've got it all. And I've figured out how to set it up. As far as I'm concerned, everything that gives me power, all I need is solar energy. I do not need on-grid. Even for water. I've got water wells here, and there are solar water pumps. There is rain, more rain here in the rainy season. It's rained the last 3 days. It must have been, all of the water wells, I must have 8,000 gallons of water in my wells, because I've got about 6 wells. I've got enough to live for water to live for a year with that solar water pump, which is nice with the changing pictures behind me. That's a natural water pump, isn't it? Which is moving, emitting protons through the air, which you experience as sound or heat or a wind or a feeling of fresh breeze, fresh cool when you go near it. That's all energy vibrations. I'll be talking a lot about that, because if you can tune in like on a radio to the algorithm and the vibrations of nature and make your own mind vibrate with it, you might just find yourself in this world, but it's as if it's another world, and you might have a very heavenly experience because our eyes are not completely open. But anyway, the point of this podcast, apart from slipping in a bit of Dharma, yeah, that is Dharma. It's actually quite science, but Dharma is science. Dharma is the true nature of all things, and science can be used to explain the true nature of all things. Yeah. Is that unlike birds who just use the natural vibrations of air conduct and even their feathers, and when they talk they use vibrations with their singing, and so And my screen just went off then, right in the middle of this. And that's really, I'm looking at the background behind me, it's really nice. I try not to look at square things, because we live in square rooms with square TVs and square everything. And if you look at irregular shapes, it will help your mind to tune into nature and to be able to feel the frequency of nature and tune into it like on a radio station, and then the world will look a bit more like it looks behind me, instead of boring as we have been taught to experience it. So anyway, no more carbon emission vehicles by 2030 and no more carbon emission in the air by 2050, my butt, because no way are they going to stop all of the public sector tourism planes, all of the planes which are travelling for the post and international trade that's going on boats, planes and trains and aeroplanes, boats, planes and boats, trains and aeroplanes, ships, container ships, oil rigs will still keep going. They're not going to stop drilling oil, because just before COVID happened, there was a plastic ban. Britain began it, America was following, even Thailand, going to 7-Eleven. They were not telling you to bring your own plastic bag, or buy or bring your own basket or a hemp sack, like a cloth sack, which is better. It's what we used to do before plastic was invented for thousands and hundreds and thousands of years. Why the heck should we use plastics for everything throw-away? It's better to have a plate you can wash and use again and again and again and again, instead of these oceans of plastic that ships have to actually circumnavigate because they're so big they can't get through them anymore, floating on the water, ruining the environment. So there was this plastic ban going on, and all of a sudden everybody's forgotten about it when COVID happened. Everybody's forgotten that the world was actually starting to ban plastics because it's destroying the environment. And 20 to 30% of the plastic industry's income comes from the oil industry, because the oil is needed to make plastic, certain kinds of plastics and rubber and stuff, rubber type plastics, different kinds of plastics. And the oil industry also needs plastics. So they're very good friends with each other, and they're the two biggest industries in the world, apart from data brokering, and information now. But otherwise, physical things, physical assets, not digital assets, plastic and oil are brother and sister. They're hand in hand. They coexist. They support each other's coexistence. They need each other for materials, and they also, the plastic industry needs oil to make many of its materials. And so it's very strange that just when plastics were going to be banned and carbon emission vehicles were going to be banned, that damages both the plastic industry and the motor car industry. Not so much, because they're going electric. They will adapt to this disruptive technology and the disruptive legislation, political law changing, disruptive legislation, plastic ban, and a ban on carbon emission vehicles. That disrupts the oil industry, the motor car industry. It's forced to adapt and change. The oil industry is pretty much ducked, with an F instead of a D, and the plastic industry with the plastic ban was going to get really ducked. Now the plastic industry is profiting twice as much as ever, because single-use, one-time use throwaway plastics, those throwaway plastics that are single-use and of zero, that's not why I'm making it zero, but of zero zero value to us, which are in fact going to destroy the world, yeah, the environment, which will cause mass extinction, including our own. But what about planes, helicopters, tanks, ships, spaceships, super tankers, oil tankers, the Maersk logistics container ships, and so on? What about all of those? Yeah, excuse me. What about all of those? Are they going to stop in 2030? Is there a ban on them? Because if there isn't, then stopping us driving our cars and motorbikes and making them so expensive that we're going to change to an electric vehicle, yeah, it'll be nicer around. It will improve the environment. But if you don't stop all of the tourist planes, the military planes, the helicopters, the personal private jets, all your tanks and military vehicles, ships, container ships, tanker ships, yeah, motorboats, my speedboat, my fishing ship, because I have it says 11 meters, it's actually 17 meters. So let's say 15, rounded off, 45-foot fishing ship, small ship, big boat. Where does the city become the suburbs? Yeah. Where does tolerable become intolerable? Where does nice and sweet become too sweet? Yeah. Where does funny become over the top and not funny anymore? Where do you draw the line? How much is a tattoo? Well, how long's a piece of string? Depends if you want a back piece or a tiny Tweety pie on your ass. Because a tiny Tweety pie on your ass uses 3 colours, yeah, and takes 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Whereas a full back piece, you're going to have to come back once a month for 6 months and spend 8 hours, or at least 3 to 4 hours every day, every time. And you're probably going to have to pay $300 an hour. So how much is a tattoo? Yeah. And carbon emissions, I'm sorry guys, politicians, just like you're screwing up COVID because you don't know what to do, so you keep doing these silly tests, which I find ridiculous, and you pass about 5 vaccines in 1/100th of the time it takes to pass the law to allow a vaccine to be legally sold. Because any vaccine that isn't this pandemic has taken years and years and years and years to pass the FDC, the medical legislation rules. And in Thailand, they've got 3 different vaccines. All 3 of them, people are, every day there's a news article on the TV saying another so many people or somebody has died within a couple of days after taking this vaccine, right? And they want to force the vaccine on people. In some of your countries, they're forcing the vaccine. The only way they force the vaccine on me, I'll double shotgun them, samurai them, threaten to set myself on fire, which is another thing coming soon. It's going to be a good one. You're going to love that one. Be shocked as well when they do it. But yeah, I'm going to chain myself to a building and set myself on fire to gain attention, because my own embassy isn't listening, and there's been some serious wrongdoing against me over the past few years. That is, I've looked up who the people were who did it. There's about 12 people or so involved. The names I've got, I don't know how many actual people are involved or who actually lies behind it precisely, but must be very powerful and a lot of money to have done it to me. Yeah. To have 6 high-ranking special agents in black suits kidnap you in the doorway of an aeroplane, take you under the airport, into the jungle for an hour, point a gun at you trying to frighten you whilst they're waiting for the other corrupt policemen to go on shift at the station where they want to take you and frame you. That's why they didn't shoot me, and I wasn't scared because I knew they were waiting for the other corrupt guy to go on shift, because the cop who was on shift at the station they were going to go to wasn't corrupt and didn't know about their secret plan. Who hired them? We shall find out. And when we find out, we shall fucking ducking get them. I need to beep that one. Otherwise I can't monetize that video. Beep. We need to ducking get them. Well, I do. Or you could be like the Buddha and just say, let go, turn the other cheek like Jesus. But, you know, if you've got corrupt police officers and special agents doing things like that, and governments paying them to do it, to try to either frame you with a life sentence and have you killed whilst you're in prison after a few days, just like lately a couple of people have been arrested and 2 days after being arrested were found dead in their cell, one in Spain and one in Thailand, and pretty soon one in America will happen. Not very soon, but pretty soon, because there's a third one that's going to be next. And all three of them were whistleblowers, a bit like me, but much more famous and made much more damage. So 2 of the 3 are dead now. Killed by governments, of course, in my opinion. Because that's a bit of a coincidence. I've been trying to get them for years. And the next one is Julian Assange. She's going to be... it was John McAfee. Killed himself, found dead in his cell 2 days after the extradition decision. I just think they just didn't want to waste their assets, bringing him back to America and just kill him, because in Spain it's very easy for America to arrange for that. It's like Mexico. If you watch Narcos Mexico, you'll see about corruption and stuff, how you can buy policemen and prison officers. Quite easy to pay to have somebody killed in prison by police officers, yeah, and say he hanged himself. It's so easy to set up in a prison cell, set up the hanging thing, yeah, put him asleep or something with some ether, and or don't even do that, just hang him and say you found him and call the doctor. Some prisons not, because they've got a CCTV, but if you're friends with the CCTV guy, or you pay him as well, and he just deletes the tape. It was lost. Funnily enough, how many tapes were lost on the news? So anyway, carbon emission vehicles by 2030. They're going to ban us from buying and using petrol cars and diesel cars and motorbikes, but all of the planes, trains, helicopters, container ships, they're going to keep pumping out that shit. And a lot of factories are going to keep pumping out that shit. So how the heck are we going to be able to attain zero carbon emission by 2050 unless we ban petrol generators, diesel generators, helicopters, tanks, super tankers, ships, speedboats, motorboats, cabin cruisers, rockets, spaceships. Elon Musk is clever because his Starlink satellites, which are offering internet from space, he shoots hundreds of them. He's shooting hundreds up. I think it's probably about 60, 70 up in the moment. Has used an ion drive for them, and he now has a semi-efficient kind of ion drive, which at least can turn things. You can't use it to go to another star or galaxy with, but he has the ion drive, and that's not a carbon emission. And he has the electric vehicle, the Tesla car, and his mega factories and stuff. So he's a little bit ahead. He's a little bit ahead, because what we need is ion drives and different kinds of, we need solar. I've seen a solar yacht. It's $2 million. I wish I could buy it. It's 4 or 5 stories with the flybridge, 5 stories. And it's as big as this house, and this is a big house. And it's got water filters, can turn seawater into drinking water and showering water. You can stay up for 2 years on the water without... Just go into a marina and stock up with rice and stuff. But with solar energy, you can live on the open ocean, which is where I'm going to retire sometime between 5 and 10 years from now. Anyway, and the air will be cleaner, with or without carbon emissions. But anyway, the plastic ban news was trending. Everybody's forgotten about it. I asked people about it. They said, no, I don't know what you mean. I think, oh my God, that was on every single news channel every day until COVID. And now COVID has just completely erased it from people's memory. The first thing I thought was that this COVID thing is deliberate and that the plastic industry and the oil industry are behind it because they're afraid of going bust and losing all of their billions and trillions of dollars and the power they have over governments with the petroleum asset, that they needed something to make petroleum and plastic continue to survive and propagate itself as an industry. If not, they were both out of the New World Order as the shadow government, as members of the shadow government, because they would represent nothing more to offer to them at all. Yeah. So I don't believe we will have no more carbon emission vehicles by 2050 at all, because of the tanks, the military vehicles, the ships, the spaceships, the helicopters, many kinds of trains and aeroplanes and destroyer ships and aircraft carriers and rockets, the Saturn V and the Falcon 9, SpaceX, Amazon's Blue Origin, which just went, not Amazon, sorry, and Amazon's Blue Origin, and Richard Branson's, I've forgotten what it's called now, but he beat both of them to it, Jeff Bezos and Musk. Yeah, Richard Branson went up first, but he doesn't go into full orbit, it's semi-orbit, but he just did a semi-orbital flight, flipped, saw the Earth, experienced weightlessness a little bit, and came back down again and landed. And that is the first space tourist vehicle. Well done, hats off to him for moving humanity forward into being a spacefaring race and a multi-planet civilization. That will change the type of civilization. You have class A, B, C, D, E, F types of civilizations, yeah? And in this universe, we're not very advanced as a type of civilization under those kind of classifications. So we need these zero carbon emissions. We need to watch out with our use of atomic power, because there are certain entities very interested in what we're doing there, considering we're not developed emotionally. We have people like Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un and Lee Hsien Loong of Singapore, who are all fascist dictators and actually complete idiots as humans, and should not be considered capable of running a country, never mind their own household. Yeah, because they can't even, Lee Hsien Loong of Singapore can't even run his own household. Even his own relatives speak out against him and have to run away and ask for asylum in America. Yeah, because he'll hang them or have them done for this, that or the other. He's a complete dictator. Yeah, that's how he got Kim Jong-un to meet with Donald Trump in Singapore and have dinner, because all three of them are complete dictatorial minds. Yeah, Donald Trump was trying to become a dictator. He's not military, but he's tantamount to a dictator. And Kim Jong-un is definitely a dictator, and so is the Prime Minister of China, is a dictator. And of Singapore is a dictator. And actually of where I live, and you know where I live, he's also a dictator. Yeah. And even if you've got a democratic country, whoever's Prime Minister, the government itself and the system is a dictator. And it's dictating to you how you should behave, this, that and the other. What you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. I didn't sign at birth that I recognized their rules. They made them up without my knowing or consent. Do what you want, make your own rules up. but don't expect me to respect them. And I haven't signed anything to say that I will follow them. So if you punish me for them according to my law, you are actually breaking my law and punishable by death in my book, because I have the death sentence for any government that thinks it can use its rules against me, so long as I haven't harmed anybody except myself, if anything, and I don't harm myself, but they might say I'm harming myself, but I wouldn't. I'd say I'm helping myself. Yeah. Got a headache? You take an aspirin. Yeah. I don't drink alcohol, but you can't sleep at night? Have a glass of wine. Or you feel a bit nervous at dinner with a new date? You have a glass of wine. Right? Is that harming yourself? I don't drink, but some people like rock climbing. Well, it's dangerous. That's harming yourself. Or you scratch yourself on the rocks. You're harming yourself. No, I'm not. I'm exercising my body and having sports. Whilst not believing that there's going to be no carbon emissions by 2050, because all of those planes and ships and tanks, are they going to stop them? And my generator and my speedboat? What's a carbon emission vehicle? No carbon emission vehicles by 2030. Well, a vehicle is anything that moves that uses a carbon emission engine. So that means helicopters, tanks, planes, spaceships, rockets, Saturn V, Falcon 9. And we've got 8 years left. Governments of the world, do you think you're really going to be able to make all of those industries and the manufacturers of those vehicles for all of those industries give up those carbon emission ships and planes and trains and automobiles and helicopters and tanks and destroyers and aircraft carriers that have just been made, latest technology? After 2030, or are they going to just keep going until 2050? Because some of those destroyer ships can run on lithium-ion batteries, which also destroy the environment in the making of the battery. Once you've got the battery itself, getting rid of it also destroys the environment. But once you're using it, yeah, you're not emitting carbon from the ship. There's one ship, American ship, military ship, can go for 29 years on those batteries. But how do you charge the batteries? And the moment it's not charging it with solar, it's charging it with grid electricity, which is carbon emission. So take the cars and the motorbikes off the roads and put electric cars on. You think that's going to con me? You might con the public, the general public, with that one, but you're not conning me with that one, that you're actually doing something to stop carbon emission, because all of your cruise ships, mega tourism cruise ships with like 20,000 people on them, or 5,000, 8,000, yeah, and all of your container ships and all of your super tankers and all of your super aircraft carriers, super carriers and destroyers and submarines and helicopters, yeah, are going to keep going way beyond 2050. And in 2050 we're supposed to have zero carbon emission in the atmosphere. So I'm sorry, boys. I say to all of the governments of the world, and also I'd like to give a special dedication to the British Embassy, and say thanks to the NHS and to the British government for once, because I'm not pleased with how they rule the country, but it's not their fault, it's economic. They don't have money for everything and they have to distribute it as best they can. But they have seen that what is really damaging, one of the two most damaging things about COVID lockdown, yeah, COVID is not the dangerous thing. The dangerous thing is the mental health that people are suffering because of COVID, loneliness and depression. And the British Embassy, for expats who are experiencing that, can't get home and stuff and are feeling suicidal, they actually have set up hotlines. If somebody calls the embassy and that kind of issue is at hand, they will find themselves talking to somebody who is trained. Like Samaritans, but much better than Samaritans, because that's a con. And I have a video on my channel about the Samaritans.org scam. If you check through my videos, please watch it, because Samaritans, although they help people who call and they feel better after the call, that's why I say let it exist, but find out the scam and tax them for every penny they've been robbing over the years, because they're making billions out of it and preying on bleeding hearts. But unfortunately, the volunteers who answer the phone to people in trouble actually do help. Yeah. Not fooling me with the no carbon emission. You're not doing anything for the environment. You're just trying to make money out of the rest of the carbon emission cars and motorbikes by making them more expensive and phasing them out slowly, and bringing in the adapting to the disruptive technology of Elon Musk with his electric car. Yeah, and you better watch out, because although he's using the Falcon 9 rocket, I'm sure he's realized what I'm talking about, and that's why his Starlink satellites use ion engines instead of petrol engines, and they don't need fuel. Yeah, all they need is ions, which are particles floating about in space. Yeah, and magnetism and stuff. You can look at that on his Stargate, on his Starlink page. You just write Starlink in Google and study up, or watch some YouTube videos about it. Actually, I have one about it. I don't know if it's on this channel or on my The Webmaster channel on YouTube. I also have one called The Webmaster, which has a blue globe as its icon. So you can look for that too. I don't have many videos yet, but I think it's either on this channel or that channel. So, carbon emissions by 2050, zero carbon emissions by 2050, impossible, because no way will the military and big industry and logistics and international trade and the need for using container ships and super tankers and stuff for transporting goods using carbon emission fuels. I don't believe they are going to go solar in 8 years. And I definitely don't believe that by 2050 battleships and aircraft carriers that were made this year are going to stop being used in 2050. So zero carbon emission by 2050, as claimed by politicians and as demanded from all signatories of the Paris Agreement, meaning if 2050 any of them are still using any of those kind of vehicles, carbon emission vehicles, including their battleships, then they are breaking the treaty, which they won't care about, because Kim Jong-un broke the treaty, Obama broke the treaty sending a helicopter into Pakistan, they broke international treaties with the UN. What happened? I mean, Donald Trump sent people into the Capitol Hill and people got killed, incitement to that. Guilty or not, he was charged with it. What happened to him? Nothing. If it was you or me, what would happen? We'd be on death row, man, or doing 20 years. Huh? Or dead. Zip, shut them up. Right? No carbon emission, anyway. I would like to dedicate this video to somebody I've never seen in my life, an acquaintance of mine who has a very big heart. He's a civil servant from England called Jeff, and I'd like to dedicate this video to Jeff. And I would like to say that the British Embassy have been told various times from me that I was kidnapped in the doorway of my aeroplane illegally by corrupt officers, agents in black suits, taken under the airport, stamped in illegally by some police officer who I have his signature on the visa stamp, and I wasn't passed through passport control. I did not enter Thailand officially. I was kidnapped, held in the jungle at gunpoint, Yeah, and I tried to tell the embassy about that and ask for help, and they hung up on me. My child was kidnapped. He was abducted, but he was kidnapped. His mother abducted him. You can't kidnap your own child to Singapore. But she did it with the assistance of the Thai Royal Police, who drove her to the airport, the silly idiots, because they were just normal policemen at a normal police station. Me and my wife had an argument, so I gave her $2,000, said take a hotel, I'll pay you a lawyer in the morning, I've got one, let's talk about divorce and custody and joint custody and access for our kid tomorrow in the morning, and we'll meet here. And instead, and I said to the policeman, forbidden for my son to be, she can go, she's free, she's over 18, but my son, under the Hague Convention, civil aspects of International Parental Child Abduction Treaty, which Thailand is signatory, and so is her country, Singapore, forbidden to take my son out of Thailand without my written consent. Yeah, without my written consent. Forbidden. So I go back to the meeting place in the morning, and then I go to the police station and I say, my wife has disappeared and so has my son. Where are they? They said, they've gone back to Singapore. I said, how do you know that? I said, we took her. I said, I told you it's forbidden to take my son out of the country. You just broke an international treaty. And they threw me out of the station. I tried to hire about 5 different lawyers. This isn't about carbon emissions anymore, but whilst I'm talking, a lot of people ask me about this, I might as well say. Tried to hire about 5 different lawyers. As soon as they knew I wanted to charge the Thai Royal Police of that particular station, of that station there, yeah, with the Kidnapping Act, because if somebody who's not a parent assists, that's aiding and abetting, it becomes a Kidnapping Act. And I called a judge in the Supreme Courts of Thailand in Jengwatana in Bangkok, who I happen to know, Judge Tirat of the Central Authority in Thailand, but he's not to do with, he can't judge against that kind of police crime. Yeah, he's a different kind of judge. He's a United Nations representative as well, and he's a friend of mine, and I called him and I told him that, and he said, that's really criminal. He said, you should charge those police with that. I said, well, how? He said, you have to do it at your local station. I said, well, the problem is the police I have to charge are the same police who are at the station I have to go to charge. So I have to go into that station and charge the police in that station. They're not going to accept the report, and they're definitely not going to accept investigating themselves. He said, oh, then that's difficult. And my lawyer said, I feel sorry for you, because as a foreigner in Thailand, all of you have very, very, very little, if not zero, chance of getting any kind of justice or fair justice as a foreigner in Thailand. I said, I know. And I can speak Thai. I defended myself in Thai in the courtroom, and I got away with what they tried to do to me, because they tried to frame me for something I didn't do, after holding me in the jungle at gunpoint for an hour and kidnapping me in the airplane. But pretty soon, the British Embassy will see that hanging up on me and seeing that nothing gets any results, even the hunger strike I did last week, and telling the British Embassy, I'm on hunger strike and I'm on day 6. Yeah. The first person hung up on me. The second person talked to me. But not because I'm on hunger strike. Rather because I said I'm going to chain myself to a government building in Bangkok, which might be the British Embassy, it might be the Parliament, it might be the military base, it might be a ministry, it might be just in the middle of town where everybody is, which is probably the best place. Most people, yeah. With loads of placards, pour petrol all over myself, yeah, and stand there with Zippo lighters. I'm going to ask Zippo if they want to sponsor me, actually, and all these clothes companies, if they want to make fireproof clothes for me. So I wear those, and then when I don't burn and I live and I'm completely okay, Yeah? That doesn't matter. CNN and NBC are already there. It's already in the news. Doesn't matter. Then I get money. It's like, wow, he wore Nike shoes that are fireproof. He wore this shirt from Zara that's fireproof. He wore this Oakley fucking glasses, ducking glasses from, I don't know who. They're fireproof. They saved his eyes. So I get a few million from that maybe. No, I'm joking. The only reason that the British Embassy did not hang up on me this time was not because I was on hunger strike and they were afraid I was going to die. Because no news people were around. They don't give a toss about their citizens. I mean, I might not have ended up talking to the person who was trying to talk me down out of the suicidal tendency. Because this particular suicidal tendency wasn't just a hunger strike, it was going to turn into international news, which means a British citizen chains himself in Thailand to a building and threatens to set himself on fire because of the wrongdoings against him, including what Singapore deleting a case I filed for $10,000, $8,000, and then another two, so 10, without my permission, which is illegal, and doing it knowingly after hearing me say, I'm running that case in person, I am my own lawyer, that case is pending, and it's waiting for hearing, forbidden to delete it. You can't delete it without my signed notice of discontinuance. It's impossible in Singapore to delete a case unless the owner of the case signs permission. But they did. I told my government about that, they hung up on me. My son gets abducted, I ask for help, they hang up on me. I get kidnapped and held at gunpoint by corrupt officers in international territory in the doorway of my aeroplane without being read my rights, told I'm arrested, asked if I want to see a consul or a lawyer, and held at gunpoint in the jungle for an hour. They hang up on me. So, the only way they're going to take interest is if I chain myself to some building and become world news, about to set myself on fire, and maybe do so if they still don't take no notice and give me what I want, because what I want is that the British Embassy look into why, after being kidnapped, I filed a case with the Anti-Corruption Ministry of Thailand against all of those police officers nearly 3 years ago, and I'm still waiting for an answer, which means those corrupt police officers have possibly got to the Anti-Corruption Ministry and paid them to throw away the case, which would mean the Anti-Corruption Ministry of Thailand might be corrupt in itself, because I haven't heard anything for 3 years and I've phoned up about 8 times and I've hired a lawyer to try and get an answer out of them and nothing. So my government should inquire about that. They won't? Okay, set myself on fire and complain and tell the world that the reason I'm setting myself on fire is because my government won't do anything for its own citizens, including serious, heavy matters like that, and being kidnapped in international territory in Thailand by corrupt Thai officers, just because they don't want to lose their political relations because of one British citizen, which means you, as a British citizen, or a citizen of any country or any embassy, they're all the same. They don't give a flying toss about you, yeah? And they don't give a flying toss about zero carbon emissions either. They're conning you all with motorbikes and cars, whilst the ships and helicopters and everything keep running. Yeah? And the British Embassy also hung up on me about my son being kidnapped. They hung up on me about me being kidnapped. Yeah? They hung up on me about helping me to inquire about why the Corruption Ministry refuses to respond about my complaint, and about me being kidnapped, not read my rights, and so on, yeah? And some other illegal matters of corrupt police. And so when I stopped saying hunger strike and said, okay, hunger strike isn't doing anything, I'm going to do this chain, like the woman in Thailand. She got what she wanted. She chained herself up. She didn't die. She chained herself up and poured petrol over herself and threatened to set herself on fire. Thing is, after you've done it, you'll go to prison for a while. But I'm willing to do that to make my point, because the British Embassy is taking absolutely no notice, except for calling me once a week, which they always hang up on me, but all of a sudden now they're calling me once a week and talking for 2 or 3 hours. The person who talks is innocent. He's a really nice person, and I really like him. I like talking. We have some great talks. Unfortunately, I know that the only reason he's been given permission to and asked to talk to me, he's just trying to help me. He's a good-hearted person. He joined to help human beings. He's a civil servant, and a real one, a servant to the civilian. But unfortunately, the organisation he works for, the British Embassy, have only told him to talk to me simply because they're scared of the news that might arise if I pour petrol over myself in public, chained to a building, and threaten to set myself on fire, to say that all these things happened to me in Thailand, and Singapore, and the British Embassy and government is ignoring it. And if they don't do something about it now, and promise to do something in front of all the news now, and really do it, if they don't do it, I'll come back and I'll be here again doing it again, saying they didn't do it, which will make them double lose face, not single lose face twice, which will really, really affect everything, their economy, their politics, their voting, absolutely everything. Yeah? I want the British Embassy to take action against the wrongdoings against me and my son as well, who is deprived of his rights to Article 10 of the rights of the child. He's not allowed to leave his country from age 5 to 16, which breaks the Hague Convention Treaty that Singapore and Thailand made with the UN, that all children with parents in 2 different countries has the right to leave and enter his own country in order to visit the other parent in the home. That's his right. He has been deprived of that right. The United Nations refused to address that, hang up on me, ignore to respond. And so they will also be named. There'll be placards around me saying it. So you really enjoy that, because that will be YouTube live. Ajarn Spencer setting himself on fire in front of, I'm not telling you where, because I don't want that any of those agents who might watch this video to know where I'm going to do it. So the element of surprise remains. At least some of it. They know what I'm going to do, but they don't know when or where or how. And they don't know how many people I'm going to have there filming, and people as backup, and people for different things. But if I don't get what I want, I will do what I threaten. And either way, the fact that they have absolutely ignored serious international crimes made by countries which have UN treaties, peace treaties with them, against British citizens, and that the British government is not just ignoring me and my problems, it's ignoring thousands and tens of thousands of expats around the world who are being abused. I mean, you look at that American guy who was caught in North Korea. What did the American government do to save him? He got sent home 2 days before he died in coma. All he did was take a painting off a wall in a hotel, and he didn't even do that. That was a fake video. They were just trying to piss America off by killing one of their innocent citizens. America did not take issue with North Korea with that, neither did the United Nations, and they still see Kim Jong-un allowed to eat dinner in Singapore with Donald Trump. And you're voting for them all. That's not because you're idiots, it's because that's all you know. But I'm trying to teach you something else. If nobody voted, nobody could come into power, and we don't need them. But if I say we don't need them, I need to tell you, if we don't need them and we get rid of them, how are we going to live? Well, I'll tell you that another day. But for now, I'll finish with what I started. There's no way that by 2050 we will reach zero carbon emissions because of all the planes, trains and automobiles and military equipment such as super tankers and carriers and blah blah, which I've already said. And so there's absolutely no point whatsoever in making that claim, except to stupid Joe, yeah, on the TV, couch potato Joe, yeah, Farmer Joe. Actually, even Farmer Joe knows these days because he's got YouTube and he can listen to people like me or other people more interesting who can explain it better. Yeah, but there's no way. There's no way they're going to stop using all of those vehicles in 2030 in order to reach zero carbon emission in 2050. There's too many super carriers on the ocean. There's too many Falcon rockets and Apollo 5s and Salyuts and God knows what. Salyut's a satellite. Whatever the Russian rocket is called, I've forgotten. Yeah, and aeroplanes in the air. How are we going to stop those in 2030, in 8 years' time? Sorry, mates, Mr. Politicians. Not believable. Try again. Think a bit more deeply, huh? Like me. And you might think that no more, a ban on carbon emission vehicles. If you've used the word vehicles instead of cars and motorbikes, then everything, including your own military stuff and your NASA stuff, has to stop. Unless you've excluded it. So let's see that law. Let's see that the Paris Agreement. The next podcast, I'm going to connect with this and we're going to have a look at the Paris Agreement because right now I'm using just the webcam. I'm not using a screen recorder, so I couldn't share my screen to show the Paris Agreement. So I'll connect it with this video and we'll have a look at the Paris Agreement to see if it leaves out certain types of carbon emission vehicles that don't have to stop in 2030, or if it just says all vehicles by 2030, because that would mean oil tankers, container ships, destroyers, aircraft carriers, helicopters, fighter planes, bomber planes, drones, and all sorts of things. Yeah, spaceships and stuff. So, and my petrol generator, my 6,000 watt petrol electric generator for when I have power cuts, which I don't use anymore because I'm solar. And the solar panels also, but that's not a vehicle anyway. And neither is my generator. So no more carbon emission things is not forbidden. No more carbon emission vehicles or no more carbon emission cars on the road. But allowing carbon emission stuff elsewhere. Let's find out what the Paris Agreement says, okay? And let's take it from there. So, for what I'm saying, Ajarn Spencer signing off. And Ajarn Spencer will sign on again with a look at the Paris Agreement to see exactly what kind of legal fictions are written in there and interpret it in my own anarchistic and unorthodox manner. And most certainly, for sure, find a hell of a lot of critique in it and try to spot things which you might not or might and strengthen the point. So, signing off and about to sign on again on the Paris Agreement. And I wish you all the best and that you should always think, peel the onion and look what's inside. Don't just read any book by the cover when you see news on YouTube or on a news channel or in a newspaper. Look who wrote it, look at their past, check the story on all channels, see all the political angles. RT is Russian based, Al Jazeera is more Arab based, NBC is this liberal or whatever, fake news channel, CNN is conservative and so on, yeah. And you find out what the real truth is and what the biased politically sided view is. And see you when I sign on with the Paris Agreement to analyse it in regard to no more carbon emission vehicles by 2030, my butt, which would mean no planes, helicopters, tanks, ships, supercarriers, container ships and spaceships. Don't get too lonely during COVID lockdown. So as you can see from the sardonic slide which I just showed, which shows just two, Canada and India's claims, which were pre-COVID, that India was the first country to ban plastic, Thailand followed, and Canada and the UK on single-use plastics, and now with COVID, the most necessary plastic of all, injections, masks, all sorts of throwaway things, single-use plastics are now the most important product in the world during what is called the COVID pandemic. Yeah. So I would like everybody to ask themselves if not COVID, if we didn't have COVID, if COVID pandemic hadn't happened, what would have happened to the plastic industry with all the worldwide plastic bans being imposed by every country, which are now suddenly disappeared, right? And everybody's forgotten about. Yeah. And it's carbon emission related. So that's why this is Ajarn Spencer signing on, talking about this particular topic. Yeah. And so with a plastic ban coming into effect, don't you think that the plastic industry moguls didn't get together and have a talk with each other about, oh dear, and all of the industries that use plastics to make their products with, such as computers, laptops and stuff like that, oh dear, what are we going to use instead? How can we stop this from happening? Because it's a disruptive legislation, not a disruptive technology. Like I explained earlier on, Elon Musk's Tesla motor car disrupted the carbon emission fuel vehicle industry, public industry, motor cars and motorbikes, not warships and spaceships that blow up more carbon emission than any of our motor cars. One Saturn V rocket, I don't know how many of us would have to drive motor cars for a year to be able to compensate for the carbon emission from one Saturn V rocket satellite launch. So plastics, as I said, are 20 to 30%, at least 20% of the income for the petroleum industry, the oil industry, crude oil industry. It's used in making many kinds of plastics and for other uses in the fabrication of plastic. It's used in hydraulics, oil, for hydraulic machinery and all sorts of things. But there's no carbon emission in that. So we're talking about carbon emission vehicles. But carbon emission, no carbon emission by 2050, doesn't have anything to do with vehicles. It has to do with all technologies related to carbon emission. Not just carbon emission fuel vehicles. Technologies and industries which use carbon emission fuel related technologies and products. And so in order to put a ban that is enough to stop any carbon emission happening by 2050 is absolutely impossible. But what I find very ironic is that they can bring in something worldwide news that was actually becoming viral, of plastic bans for the environment, and absolutely necessary to say no to single-use plastics. And that now single-use plastics have transformed themselves from becoming banned, about to become banned and already banned in some places, to becoming absolutely indisposable. So they're actually disposable single-use plastics. But these disposable things have now become indisposable. Yeah? Every single syringe used for every COVID vaccine, every pair of gloves, well, they're latex, but, well, no, they have gloves that are rubber as well, and every rubber thing they put on, and all of the plastic bags and the blood bags, and it's all single use. The tubes they put in you, it's all single use. It's plastic. Single use plastic is the most best selling item in the world apart from data and information about people. Yeah, information is the most valuable asset in the world in the moment. But single use plastics. And that's 20% of the oil industry. That's enough to keep them alive. It's not enough to keep them with the other 80%. But the other 80%, how much of the other 80% of petroleum and diesel is for the cars you and me are going, and motorbikes you and me are going to drive on the road, which will be banned for manufacture and sale in 2030, and slowly phased out the older ones by making petroleum more expensive and spare parts becoming rarer and more expensive. So your existing petroleum vehicle or diesel vehicle is going to become impossible to keep, and the insurance will be so high. Yeah. Because of the damage. There will probably be some kind of yearly fine because you're still driving a carbon emission fuel vehicle. So you'll probably have to pay an extra cost for that. And to make it impossible, to force you into getting rid of it and stop using it. That's for sure. Yeah. In Davos, they're saying, I have nothing, I have no possessions, and I am happy. No money, and I am happy. And then they're throwing all this Bitcoin digital currency thing at you. So, have no possessions. Well, what about the house I bought? Quite easy. It started with a government bought a company, and the American government bought at least one company, shell company, that is offering 50% above market price to buy your house from you. They've already bought up almost all houses in one certain sector of a province, because if somebody offers you 50% more than you could normally sell it for, you're going to sell it. And so slowly but surely, everybody will sell their house until nobody owns their own house anymore. And you'll have to subscribe by Bitcoin, because there'll be no such thing in a cashless society as paper money. The only kind of cash type thing you'll have there is like gold coins and silver coins and gold and silver ingots or other assets sold for shrimps on the street with somebody, and you won't have to pay tax on it, otherwise you will. And that's what the COVID period is doing. But the question is, did the plastic industry and the petroleum industry work undercover in cahoots with each other to instigate the COVID epidemic? Fake news story. True or false? Is COVID true or false? Investigate for yourself. I've investigated and I've made my conclusions. My conclusions connect with the plastic industry and the oil industry. Whether the virus is real or not, I've also concluded, but I wish you to conclude for yourselves through deep study, such as trying to find an electron microscope image of COVID-19 and seeing if you can find one, and reading up on it, and looking up at all the COVID deaths you can find and see if each death actually had some other mortal illness, or if they were above 50, yeah, or if they had some other mortal illness, or if they were dissidents or wanted for being whistleblowers or something like that, yeah. And to ask yourself about, if so many millions, hundreds of millions of people have COVID, how come we don't have thousands of people on YouTube actually telling their stories And I've been to a lot of hospitals. I haven't actually seen any COVID ward or anybody with COVID. I don't know anybody with it. I know some people who say my uncle had it, but what I say is that they told your uncle he had it, because I can't prove it exists, and until I can prove it exists, it doesn't. I already told him my previous podcast, one of my previous late, just recently posted, that 3 Chinese ethnic Americans went from Harvard Medical University 3 months before the COVID outbreak with 10 test tubes of um, bacteriological stuff, bacteria, virology, from the virology lab to the virology lab in Wuhan in China. And 3 months later, this COVID thing happens. Were they paid by people hired by the oil and the moguls who control the oil and the plastic industry, which was going to disappear because of the worldwide coming ban on single-use plastics? Repeat-use plastics it's not good, but they don't make so much profit on that as they do single-use. And now single-use plastics, from being banned, have gone to becoming the number one physical asset on sale in the world today, be it syringes for vaccines or medical equipment or things that just have to be hygienic, and making society think hygienically to the point where they buy as many single-use plastic items as they can in order to be hygienic. And what's that going to do to our environment? Yeah, with a no more carbon emission by 2050 and save the environment. And Joe Biden, who's just got into office now this year after Trump, as I'm recording, in the time I'm recording, saying he's going to address the issues of environmental control and evade environmental disaster. Well, by making everybody forget the worldwide plastic ban, and people have completely forgotten it, that it was there. It was right in our faces. It was happening. And then there was COVID. And we're talking about no more carbon emissions, which means getting rid of the petroleum industry, even more powerful than the plastic industry. And you have the military there with all their aircraft carriers and stuff. And all of the plastics needed for industries. The plastic ban has gone. So don't you think that the carbon emission vehicles ban will go? It won't go. It will be limited. It will be limited to you and me and our vehicles, but it won't be limited to the government's aircraft carriers and NASA's Saturn V rocket, or to the industries they use for manufacturing things, which use petroleum. So it's all a load of bovine feces, isn't it, really? So there you go. Plastic ban and no more carbon emissions by 2050, but a ban on carbon emission vehicles by 2030, with all those aircraft carriers, ships, planes, trains, automobiles, petrol generators, helicopters, drones, and other petroleum-driven things, and diesel-driven things, boats, speedboats, and other things. Yeah. Do you think they are going to stop in 2030? Why did the plastic ban disappear on single-use plastics, and why are single-use plastics now the most necessary item on the planet? Good for thought, huh? Good for thought. Ajarn Spencer, trying to make you contemplate and see something suspicious, which I find suspicious, signing off.